The mansion sat proudly at the end of a quiet, tree-lined road in the English countryside. Tall gates shielded it from view, but behind those iron bars, not everything glittered. Inside its cold, marble walls lived Mr. Francis Ogde, a successful Nigerian-born architect known across London for his cutting-edge designs, and beside him, his much younger and notoriously proud wife, Madam Chinny. But the real heart of this story begins not with them, but with Naomi, a quiet, gentle girl who had come to work as a maid in the Ogde household 6 months earlier. Naomi's life had never been easy. Orphaned young and passed from distant relative to distant relative, she had learned early how to survive without complaint. She was the type of girl who said thank you even when given the scraps of yesterday's food and smiled while sweeping hallways long after midnight. Her room in the mansion was hardly more than a broom cupboard, cramped, musty, and without a window. She slept on a thin mattress on the floor with only a folded jumper for a pillow. But Naomi never complained. She wore her humility like a second skin, and her silence made her almost invisible. Almost. Because someone had begun to notice her. Francis, usually buried in work or away on site visits, had taken to observing Naomi quietly from the study windows. He noticed how she tiptoed past Chinny to avoid waking her, how she greeted the postman with a soft smile, how she hummed to herself while doing the dishes, the tune always the same, gentle, hopeful. Francis began to realize something disturbing. His own home, despite its riches, was absent of peace. The laughter had left long ago, and the way Chinny often yelled sometimes at Naomi, sometimes at the help, and occasionally even at him, made the house feel less like a home and more like a cage. Naomi, in her quiet way, became a flicker of calm in an otherwise turbulent household. Then came her birthday. Naomi hadn't told anyone, she never celebrated. But Francis had overheard her whispering to the gardener the day before. "It's nothing," she'd said. "Just another day." But to Francis, it wasn't. On that morning, while Chinny was out shopping in Knightsbridge, Francis called Naomi into the sitting room. She entered slowly, unsure of what she'd done wrong. But to her surprise, he handed her a small bag. "Open it," he encouraged softly. With trembling hands, Naomi opened the bag to find a simple but beautiful navy blue dress, modest, elegant, with fine stitching at the collar. Her eyes filled with tears. She had never received a gift before. Not for her birthday. Not ever. "Sir," she stammered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know what to say." "You deserve it, Naomi," Francis replied, his tone warm. "You've been working so hard. I just wanted you to have something for yourself." She clutched the dress to her chest, her gratitude shining through every tear. But then, the front door slammed. Footsteps, sharp, fast, echoed down the hall. Chinny had returned, and she walked in just in time to see Naomi wiping her eyes, the gift bag still open. "What's this?" she snapped, her eyes narrowing. Francis turned, his calm face meeting the storm in hers. "It's a birthday present. For Naomi." There was a silence, thick and dangerous, before Chinny scoffed. "A present? For the maid? Are we running a charity now?" Naomi stepped back instinctively, clutching the dress tighter, but saying nothing. Chinny's eyes blazed. "So now you're rewarding her for washing floors. What next? Her own room? A seat at the table?" Francis kept his voice steady. "It's just a dress, Chinny." "Oh, I see what this is," she hissed. "You're favoring her now, giving her special attention." "Be careful, Francis. I'm treating her with respect," he said firmly. "Something you might consider." That was enough. Chinny spun on her heels and stormed out of the room, the sound of her heels stabbing the floor as she disappeared down the hallway. Naomi stood frozen. She felt torn, grateful for the gift, but terrified by Chinny's reaction. As Chinny reached the stairs, she paused just long enough to glance back. Her eyes locked with Naomi's, not in fear, not in surrender, but in a silent promise. The atmosphere in the Ogde mansion shifted after Naomi received the birthday dress. The warmth that Francis had shown her began to melt under the heat of Chinny's suspicion. Chinny was not a woman used to being overshadowed. Her designer clothes, manicured nails, and endless Instagram selfies told the world she was the queen of her home. But in her eyes, Naomi's quiet presence and Francis's sudden kindness to her were threats, subtle, yet unforgivable. You think I don't see it? Chinny snapped one evening, confronting Francis as he sat reading in his study. You're always watching her. Giving her gifts now? A maid? Francis sighed, refusing to be baited. She's a human being, Chinny. She works hard. It was a birthday gift. That's all. Oh please, Chinny scoffed, arms folded tightly across her chest. Next you'll be offering her a seat at the dinner table. She deserves basic kindness. Something she rarely gets in this house. Chinny didn't respond. She simply turned and walked out, lips pursed, her silence far more dangerous than any insult. From that day on, Naomi's life became more unbearable than ever. The leftover food she once received was now forgotten entirely. Her cleaning shifts doubled. Chinny's words turned razor-sharp. Don't get comfortable. You think you're special now, don't you? Watch yourself. But Naomi never answered back. She bore the cruelty with quiet endurance, though the weight of it pressed harder every day. Then came the morning that changed everything. It was just after sunrise. Naomi was sweeping the front garden when Chinny's voice called from the corridor window, syrupy sweet. Naomi, come here. Bring the dress. The one Francis gave you. Naomi, puzzled, obeyed. She cradled the navy blue dress in her arms like it was made of silk and gold. Her heart was beating strangely fast. Chinny was waiting near the dustbin outside with a metal drum and a lighter in hand. Madam, Naomi asked gently, her voice uncertain. I've decided you don't need this, Chinny said coolly. You're getting ahead of yourself. Naomi's eyes widened in disbelief. Please, madam. It's the only gift I've ever received. Chinny's expression darkened. Exactly. And before Naomi could stop her, Chinny snatched the dress and tossed it into the drum. A flick of her lighter, and the flames danced to life. No, please, Naomi cried, rushing forward, but it was too late. The dress curled and blackened in the fire, its delicate fabric turning to ash. Naomi collapsed to the ground, her tears streaming silently as the last threads of her dignity smoldered away. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She just watched, frozen, shattered. That's what happens when you overstep, Chinny said coldly, brushing her hands clean. You're nothing but a maid. Stay in your place. From that day forward, Naomi spoke even less. She walked with lowered eyes and avoided Francis whenever possible. But Francis was no fool. He noticed. You seem quieter than usual, he said one afternoon. Everything all right? Yes, sir, Naomi replied quickly, forcing a smile. I'm just tired. Francis didn't press. But the way she avoided his gaze unsettled him. Then came the unexpected invitation. Francis was due to visit one of his ongoing construction sites, a large residential project where some of Naomi's former colleagues still worked. Knowing how much they had supported her during hard times, he offered, "Would you like to come along? I'm sure they'd love to see you." Naomi's eyes lit up. Really, sir? I'd love that. The next morning, she stood outside the car, ready. But when Francis saw her, he paused. She was wearing an old, faded dress, the same one she always wore before. Not the one he had gifted her. I thought you might wear your new dress, he said gently. Naomi hesitated, feeling Chinny's eyes watching from the window behind them. I'm saving it for a special day, she said quickly, looking down. Francis gave a small nod, though his confusion remained. All right then. Let's go. As the car pulled away, Chinny stood behind the curtain, smirking. Naomi was too frightened to tell the truth. And that fear, Chinny believed, meant she had one. But she wasn't finished. Not yet. Later that week, Chinny called Naomi into the sitting room. Her tone was surprisingly calm, even pleasant. You've been working hard, she said. I want us to start fresh. Naomi blinked, unsure. Yes, Ma. Let's talk like sisters, Chinny said with a sweet smile. No more fighting. Naomi smiled faintly, cautiously hopeful. But she didn't know. This wasn't peace. It was a trap. For a brief, flickering moment, Naomi allowed herself to believe that things might be changing. It was a quiet afternoon. The rain tapped gently against the windows of the oaked mansion, and Chinny's voice called out softly from the sitting room. "Naomi, come here." Naomi dried her hands on her apron and stepped out from the kitchen. Chinny was lounging on the velvet sofa, legs crossed, her expression strangely serene. "Sit," she said, patting the cushion beside her. Naomi blinked in surprise. Never once had she been invited to sit, let alone beside Madam Chinny. She hesitated, unsure if this was some kind of test. "Don't be shy. Sit," Chinny repeated with a calm, almost sisterly tone. Naomi slowly sat down, perching on the edge of the cushion. Chinny smiled, warm but unreadable. "I've been harsh. I know that. Ever since you came into this house, I've treated you like dirt. But truth be told," she paused, "I was wrong. You're not my enemy." Naomi looked at her, heart fluttering with uncertainty. "I want to start over," Chinny continued. "Let's be sisters. Life's too short for all this fighting." Naomi let out a shaky breath, nodding. "Thank you, Ma. That means a lot." "No more Ma. Just Chinny." Naomi smiled faintly. Was this finally peace? "I'm hungry," Chinny added suddenly, stretching. "Could you make me some noodles? I've got a headache, and I could do with something light." "Of course," Naomi replied, eager to maintain the moment. She hurried to the kitchen, boiled the water, and prepared the noodles with care. She didn't know what had prompted the change in Chinny's heart, but she was grateful for it, or so she thought. Minutes later, she returned with a steaming bowl, placing it gently on the center table. "I hope it's okay," Naomi said softly. Chinny barely looked up. "Thank you," she said, still smiling. Naomi turned to leave, but the scream came just seconds later. "Naomi!" She froze in the corridor. "You wicked girl!" Chinny shrieked, stumbling back from the bowl, clutching her stomach. "You tried to poison me." Naomi spun around. "What? No. Madam, I didn't." "You think I didn't see you?" Chinny cried out. "You put something in it. Something white. I saw it." Naomi's voice trembled. "Madam, I swear on my life, I didn't put anything, Francis." Chinny wailed, falling to her knees as Francis came rushing down the stairs. "She's trying to kill me. This maid wants me dead." Francis looked between them, stunned. "What are you talking about?" "She poisoned the food." Chinny pointed at Naomi, eyes wild and full of accusation. "Look at her. She's trying to take over this house, and now she wants me gone." Naomi shook her head violently, near tears. "Sir, I would never." "I didn't. Please believe me." "Enough," Chinny yelled, turning back to the bowl dramatically. "I feel dizzy already. Look what she's done." The room was spinning. Naomi's hands trembled. This was madness. She hadn't done anything. In a moment of desperation, she stepped forward, grabbed the bowl, and took a spoonful of noodles. Francis shouted, "Naomi, no!" But she'd already swallowed it. "There," she cried, her voice cracking. "I ate it. There's nothing in it." And then the pain hit. Sharp. Burning. Deep in her stomach. Naomi gasped, her hands clenching her belly. Her legs gave way. She dropped to the floor, writhing in agony. "Naomi!" Francis rushed to her side as she screamed in pain, her body trembling uncontrollably. "I don't understand," she whimpered, her voice fading. Francis scooped her up, his own heart racing. "We're going to the hospital, hold on." As they rushed out, Chinny remained frozen on the spot, her face unreadable. But when the front door closed behind them and the sound of the car faded into the distance, she leaned back against the couch and smiled. A slow, satisfied smile. She had planned this. And she thought she had one. The sterile white walls of the hospital ward buzzed softly with the distant hum of machines, but inside Naomi's small bed, the world felt heavy and quiet. Her body was fragile, still trembling from the violent pain that had racked her moments earlier. She lay pale and weak, barely conscious, fighting to cling on to life. Francis paced anxiously by her bedside, his usually calm and composed demeanor replaced by a storm of worry and guilt. His heart pounded in his chest. How had things come to this? How had the woman he barely noticed, the quiet maid in the servants' quarters, ended up fighting for her life because of the cruelty festering inside his own home? He sat down carefully, taking Naomi's frail hand in his. Her eyelids fluttered, she gave a faint, exhausted smile. "I'm so sorry, Naomi," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "I should have seen it sooner. I should have protected you." Determined to uncover the truth, Francis left the hospital briefly, returning to the mansion where suspicion and tension had thickened the air. Alone in the study, he sat before the security monitor, fingers trembling as he scanned through footage from the day's earlier hours. His breath hitched when he saw it. There, crystal clear, was Chinny. She approached the kitchen counter where Naomi had been preparing the noodles, her face inscrutable but her movements deliberate. A small bottle emerged from the shadows of the cupboard, a vial, suspicious liquid that she poured carefully into the pot. Chinny's lips curled into a cold, malicious smile as she watched the poison swirl invisibly into the broth. Francis's stomach churned. The staged scene, the accusations, the screams, all a cruel performance to frame Naomi. Fury ignited inside him like a blazing fire. This was no longer about quiet forgiveness or polite suspicion. It was about justice, about truth, about protecting the woman who had been wronged in the darkest way imaginable. He stormed out, the video footage playing relentlessly in his mind as he made his way back to the mansion. The front door creaked open to reveal Chinny, impeccably dressed, her expression one of feigned innocence. "Francis, you're back. Is everything all right?" she asked, voice silky but laced with an edge of challenge. Francis met her gaze, cold and unwavering. "I saw everything, Chinny." Her smile faltered. He didn't pause. "I have security footage showing you lacing the noodles with poison, trying to kill Naomi." Her eyes darted away briefly, then narrowed. "Pack your things," he ordered, his voice firm and final. "You're leaving. Now." Chinny's composure cracked. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but they held no truth, only bitter defeat. "You can't do this to me," she whimpered. "This is my home." Francis stepped closer, his tone resolute. "Not anymore. And if you ever set foot here again, I won't hesitate to press charges." She collapsed onto the floor, sobbing inconsolably. But Francis turned away, leaving her behind as he returned to the hospital. Back at Naomi's bedside, he took her hand again, a gentle warmth replacing the earlier tension in his eyes. "I'm sorry for everything you've been through," he said softly. "No more silence. No more fear. From now on, I'll protect you." Naomi's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of relief. For the first time, she felt seen, valued, safe. Francis smiled faintly. "It's time you started living for yourself, Naomi, not just surviving." Her heart fluttered with a hope she hadn't dared to feel before. Outside, the rain had stopped. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting a golden glow over them both, a quiet promise of new beginnings. The months that followed were nothing short of miraculous. Where once Naomi had hidden behind the shadow of fear and despair, she now stood tall, steadier, stronger, and filled with a quiet determination that surprised even herself. The woman who had once been a timid, overworked maid was blossoming into a beacon of hope, not just for herself, but for countless others who had suffered in silence. Francis had kept his promise. He had enrolled Naomi in a local adult education program, and from day one, she threw herself into her studies with the same humility and grit that had characterized her work in the mansion. The lessons that once felt so distant and daunting now opened doors she'd only ever dreamed of. Maths, literature, even public speaking all became tools she wielded with surprising ease. But Naomi's transformation was not just academic. Her experiences had forged in her a fierce compassion. She began volunteering in community centers, mentoring young girls from disadvantaged backgrounds, teaching them the importance of education, self-worth, and resilience. These girls, some abandoned, others neglected, looked up to her with a mixture of awe and gratitude, seeing in Naomi proof that their circumstances did not define their futures. In time, Naomi founded a charity dedicated to supporting abused and homeless young women, providing shelter, counseling, and education. The foundation grew rapidly, gaining support from local businesses and philanthropists alike. Naomi often reflected on the dark nights she had spent alone, hungry and frightened, and resolved to ensure no other girl would endure what she had. Meanwhile, Francis watched her with a growing sense of admiration and something deeper, love. He had seen Naomi rise from the ashes of cruelty, her spirit unbroken. More than the maid who had quietly cleaned his house, she had become the woman who filled his home with genuine warmth and peace. One evening, as they sat in the garden beneath the twinkling glow of fairy lights, Francis took Naomi's hand gently. His voice was low and sincere. "Naomi," he said, "I have to be honest. I've never met anyone like you. You've always been more than a maid. You've been my light." Naomi's breath caught. She blinked back tears, overwhelmed and unsure if she deserved such words, such affection. Francis reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Will you marry me?" Shock, disbelief, and joy mingled in Naomi's heart. She had never imagined this moment, not in a million years. But as she looked into Francis's eyes, she saw nothing but truth and hope. With a trembling smile, she nodded. "Yes, I will." Their wedding was nothing like the grand affairs Naomi had seen in films. It was simple, heartfelt, and intimate, held in a modest chapel surrounded by the people who had supported their journey. The ceremony brimmed with emotion, laughter, tears, and the unspoken promise of new beginnings. Naomi walked down the aisle, not as a timid maid, but as a woman transformed, proud, dignified, and radiant. When Francis took her hand, the crowd witnessed not just a union of two people but the triumph of love, courage, and faith. The story of Naomi's rise from hardship to happiness spread quietly, inspiring many. But those closest to her knew the truth. Naomi's beauty, grace, and success were never about looks or charm. They were about the strength of her character, the kindness she showed in the darkest moments, and the resilience that refused to be broken. In a heartfelt speech at their wedding reception, Francis summed it up perfectly: never judge people by their struggle. Sometimes, the most broken souls carry the purest hearts. And when the time is right, even life will rise to defend them. Naomi smiled, her eyes shining with the promise of tomorrow. She was no longer the poor maid thrown out of the house. She was a survivor, a leader, and above all, a woman who had rewritten her own story.